First shown nearly 3 years ago under the name Project Eve, the Korean-developed Stellar Blade has finally arrived, and for me it delivers an experience that feels like a proper, complete, polished console game. You see, in this age of incomplete, buggy launches and countless promises buried deep within patch notes, Stellar Blade launches in an impressively complete state. This is an impeccable, gorgeous, and fun action game that perfectly balances modern sensibilities with design elements that would feel right at home on the PlayStation 2, and that's a good thing, as we'll get to. So today I'd like to share my thoughts and findings on the final version of Stellar Blade. We'll be discussing the visual quality, the design, the performance metrics, and more. So let's get into it. It's fair to say that many of us were skeptical when Stellar Blade was first revealed. You see, while the game was getting a lot of attention for its main character, there were a lot of questions surrounding the game itself. Its developer Shift Up, for instance, has never made a large-scale console experience, instead focusing on mobile games. Furthermore, the various pre-release media showed unstable performance, leading us to wonder how the final game might perform. Once I got my hands on the game though, it's clear that these concerns were unnecessary, and the final product is a cohesive experience that harkens back to a time when Sony Computer Entertainment would publish games across a wide range of genres. The PlayStation and PS2 era were packed with first-party published games developed by partner studios that played in so many different genres and themes. That's exactly where Stellar Blade sits. In a sense, it feels almost like a game from 2003 built using modern technology and design elements. It's not another sequel or remaster, nor are the dads contained within sad. It's just a gosh darned enjoyable video game. Part of this stems from its impressive level of polish. You see, Shift Up has taken a slightly conventional approach to visual design that works to their advantage, creating something that plays like a console game should. To that end, the game is built using Unreal Engine 4, but it's not pushing any technical boundaries, yet at the same time it offers players a completely fluid, stable, and attractive game that feels complete and polished even in this pre-release form. The developer makes a statement right from the main menu. A ruined Earth looms in the background as you configure your preferences. When you finally press the New Game button, the scene seamlessly springs to life.
Transmitting final briefing. As of now, Airborne Squad 7 will exterminate the Alpha Nativas occupying District 3. Their objective is the capture or dispatchment of the Elder Nativa. Pods entering atmosphere.
No loading screens or fade to blacks here, it simply begins, just like that. I'm always a sucker for this seamless menu to game transition, and Stellar Blade delivers in spades. By the time you reach the surface and everything on the mission has gone wrong, the camera pulls back behind Eve and hands you control. Again, it's completely seamless. This initial sequence is impressive to behold, with explosions rocking the scene as you rush ahead and begin to unleash strings of combos. You can of course begin playing directly from this point, but as has become a habit, I dipped into the options menu to explore the various settings on offer. I was slightly disappointed to see that the game lacks a toggle for the film grain effect, which looks okay to my eyes, but not everyone has a taste for film grain, plus it makes video production more challenging. Motion blur and camera shake are at least fully adjustable. Furthermore, Stellar Blade does support HDR, but there is one caveat. The game does not take into account the PS5 system level HDR calibration. That means you'll need to adjust these settings carefully to match your set. In my case, I found that boosting the brightness slider, when combined with a very slight increase in contrast, produced a pleasing image when using the HGIG mode, but your mileage may vary. Once you've settled into the game and begin playing then, take a moment to look around you. Stellar Blade takes place across a ruined Earth in the future. There's little doubt that you'll be reminded of the Nier series, yet it still feels compelling and engaging on its own. Stellar Blade is a game that leans heavily on its art design then. The urban ruins, for instance, are reasonably detailed with debris and crumbling structures filling your view, but it's the actual art direction itself that really makes it work. It's a good lesson in leveraging design without pushing technical boundaries in order to reach a target level of performance. What do I mean? Well, as an Unreal Engine 4 game, Stellar Blade relies on all the typical UE4 features. You have things like volumetrics, the baked lighting, the entire post-processing suite such as depth of field and motion blur, and more. Compared to some of the higher-end UE4 titles such as Jedi Survivor, you won't see any sort of advanced ray tracing features or visual flourishes. Instead, the team focuses on performance. Compared to the instability of something like Jedi Survivor, Stellar Blade manages to avoid almost all stutters and hiccups completely. It is extremely smooth. Furthermore, the game has very fast loading, and the frame rate itself is nearly flawless, at least in specific modes. My experience has been remarkably free of bugs or unexpected behaviors as well. To me, this demonstrates an impressive level of restraint and polish in pursuit of the best player experience, and there's something to be said for this. Of course, that's not to say there aren't visual flourishes to appreciate. The character models, for instance, are all very well done with dense meshes.
Every mesh is just brimming with triangles.
Boasting a nice blend of materials both for skin and outfits alike. Eve and her comrades exhibit superb secondary motion characteristics that would put a smile on the face of Dead or Alive series creator Tomonobu Itagaki. The cutscenes in general all just generally look great, with awesome use of post-processing such as depth of field and very expressive detailed character models. And they retain that same seamlessness I mentioned earlier throughout the game. This gels with the primary animation work that ensures that characters look and feel great both while exploring the world and fighting through enemy hordes. The one caveat to visual consistency is how things like thin objects such as hair can appear somewhat noisy at times with a lot of visible breakup. The physics applied to the hair are neat at least, but it's nice that a shorter hair option is available for those distracted by the shimmer and noise. Of course, this is just for the main characters. I'm also a fan of the enemy designs and animation work, especially on these gigantic bosses. You'll face off against some truly outrageous designs that offer up a steep challenge and some impressive visuals. It's often difficult to parse what you're looking at with these strange designs, but it only amps up that sense of intrigue. Despite their massive size, everything moves so fluidly, something enhanced by the excellent use of per-object motion blur. Great stuff. The environment itself is also rather large in scope and reasonably detailed, but the restraint on display means there are some rough edges. So on the positive side, things like structures populating the world, along with the actual level layouts, feel properly post-apocalyptic in design with a lot of density. It's not even just limited to these vistas of ruined cities either, there's a lot of different places to explore. The maps themselves are all very large, yet decidedly not open world in the traditional sense. It features proper pathing, obstacles, and shortcuts to uncover. When standing back and looking at the big picture, most of the environments are simply gorgeous. However, when I say that Shift Up has taken a conservative approach to visuals, this applies mostly when you look closely. Textures and fine detail can often appear blurry and low resolution at times. Things like reflections and shadows are often handled in screen space with visible artifacts. Stellar Blade also seems to use standard Unreal Engine baked lighting, which means areas without a direct light source lack convincing indirect lighting. Of course, each of these points also has a counterpoint, for instance the textures. While some of them are a bit low res, others look quite good, even taking advantage of features to provide additional depth to each surface. Running water also interacts with the player character's model, generating splash particles as she becomes drenched. And speaking of particles, that's another high point for the game's visuals. There are a lot of cool pyrotechnic effects and GPU-based particles happening in this game. Again, it's nothing new for Unreal Engine 4, but it looks really great and is very well executed. And that's really what this is about, good execution. So while environmental quality is certainly mixed, I think it's a success overall, and the game largely looks excellent. Also, fans of Deus Ex, Daikatana, Tomb Raider, and the like will be happy to see IDOS logos plastered all over the game world. Clearly a reference to the now defunct publisher, right? This then brings us to image quality. Tom covered this in the preview, and the final game appears to be largely the same, but essentially there are three graphics modes in here. One that favors performance, another that favors resolution, and one that attempts to strike a nice balance between the two. Quality mode aims for native 4K rendering, and usually manages to hit this target, but there is visible dynamic resolution scaling evident from time to time. The caveat here is that it drops the frame rate to 30 frames per second. Performance mode, however, delivers a 1440p presentation, also with dynamic resolution scaling enabled, but like the quality mode, mostly sticks to the 1440p target. Each of these modes uses basic spatial upscaling to reach the target output. The balance mode then is more interesting in that this resolution is often lower, ranging between 1080p and 1440p most of the time, yet this one uses temporal upscaling via reconstruction. As a result, image quality can actually exceed the native 4K option in certain instances. Look at the shimmering and noise here visible on this tower. Comparing the three modes, you see that the balanced mode actually looks best. So while there is often more pixel detail using the 30 FPS quality mode, I think balanced mode largely looks better. And that's interesting because beyond image quality, there really aren't any other visual differences evident between them. But wait, if you have to zoom in to see this, is it really a big deal? Well, yes it is. It's extremely visible when playing it live on a real TV, but when watching a video like this on a phone or a laptop screen, it does actually require zooming in to see it clearly, especially if you're not watching this on an actual 4K display. So the main difference lies in performance then, and each of these modes has a very specific use case that will vary based upon your TV to some degree. Performance mode is perhaps the most impressive here in that it delivers a rock-solid 60 frames per second, I'd wager 99% of the time or so. Even when things heat up, the frame rate is almost perfect. The only time I detected any slowdown was during very specific cutscenes like this, and even then it's very brief. Shift Up deserves a lot of praise for the work they've done because locking down to a perfectly stable 60 FPS without any hiccups or stuttering is truly a commendable feat. Quality mode, though, simply targets 30 FPS and in my opinion is the least interesting mode as a result. The game just flat out plays worse at 30 FPS and frankly it's not worth using when you have the option for 60. It is at least properly frame paced and very stable, so at least they implemented it correctly. Balanced mode, however, is more interesting. This one targets 60 frames per second and is indeed very stable most of the time, but it can exhibit dips below 60. The key here is that these drops almost universally manage to stay above 50 frames per second, save for very, very brief instances. This is important because it means that the game sits comfortably within the 48 to 60 FPS VRR window of PlayStation 5. As a result, this feels like a mode designed for VRR displays, and is the mode I'd suggest using if you have such a monitor. The dips in performance are basically undetectable with VRR engaged. The reason I like this so much though is that the developers did not skimp out on a proper locked 60 FPS option. Rather, balanced is simply a bonus option for VRR users that produces better image quality. It's actually still pretty usable without VRR, mind you, and it does kind of vary per area. The desert, for instance, is a mostly locked 60 in balance mode, but other areas don't fare quite as well. This is, though, a perfect example of how to do performance modes in a console game. Shift Up nailed this aspect 100%, exceeding most other Unreal Engine games I've played this generation. Well done. So yeah, from a tech perspective, Stellar Blade lives up to the word stellar, with excellent performance across the board, attractive visual design, and in my case, a completely bug-free experience. But there's more to this game. I mentioned earlier that it kind of reminded me of the early 2000s, when games often attempted ideas that may or may not work out perfectly, but those bits added flavor to the overall experience. For instance, there's this point where you have to infiltrate an abandoned underground laboratory, right? Throughout this section, you're unable to wield your blade, forcing the player to shift strategies relying exclusively on your drone-based cannon. That in and of itself is already an interesting twist, but along the way, there's moments where they introduce random mechanics that you really don't see again, such as this point where you need to shut down a large ventilation fan and it's blowing debris towards you that you need to dodge. Or this other section where lasers suddenly block you into a room, forcing you to deal with incoming foes as the room becomes increasingly small. There's even a puzzle where you need to cross a gap by landing on the correct PlayStation symbols. based on an order specified at the start of the challenge. These sequences play unlike anything else you'd experienced up to this point, and honestly, I thought it added a lot of nice variety to the mix. To that end, while Stellar Blade does have elements of modern From Software titles and of course Nier Automata, it also reminds me more of Team Ninja's seminal Ninja Gaiden, at least in terms of the overall structure and pacing. No, the combat system isn't on that level, but the way the map is built, the progression through the game, random set pieces that rely on different mechanics, etc., it just really reminded me of my first time going through that Xbox masterpiece. I was genuinely stunned by how well put together and paced the game truly is. You'll want to keep pushing forward to see more of the world and deal with new, unexpected challenges along the way. All of this, however, is greatly enhanced by a superb audio presentation. Mostly. Alright, so the actual production work on the sound is great. The overall soundscape, the sound effects, the voice acting, it's all very well done. The game even includes multiple voiceover languages, including what I presume to be the original Korean voice track, which is nice. More importantly, the soundtrack is superb and adds a lot to the experience. Drawing clear inspirations again from the Nier series, I'd say, Stellar Blade features a huge range of vocal tracks, varying from these driving electronic sounds suitable for combat, to haunting melodies that sit with you as you explore.
Let's look for the Legion in the square building.
And beyond. The soundtrack adds a lot to the experience and is a key part of what makes the journey feel memorable. However, there's one audio-related bugbear I wanted to mention, and that's the surround sound. So firstly, I found that with Dolby Atmos selected at the system level on PS5, with the AVR receiving the signal, the game only seemed to output in stereo, which is not the case for other titles I've tested. Switching over to linear PCM solved this, but it also highlights some issues I have with the surround mix. It goes a little too heavy on the rear channels, with a lot of sound and even music playing behind you. So in that sense, I kind of feel like the surround sound experience could also use some additional tweaking. The last thing I wanted to mention though is the input latency. This was a hot topic raised when the demo first released, and it's true, there does appear to be a slight delay with certain actions. But after playing the game for countless hours, I kind of forgot about it and became accustomed to it. It kind of feels like it's an intentional part of the design, kind of an animation priority thing. So all I can really say to this though is that you should try the demo first and see if you can get used to the combat. But yeah, that pretty much covers most of the topics I wanted to discuss for Stellar Blade. The key here is that I walked away having had a fantastic time with the game and look forward to playing all the way to the end. It's a super slick action game with nice visuals, great performance, an awesome presentation, and fun combat. It's not without its faults, but I definitely think this is one of the best things Sony has published in quite a while. And I'm happy to see them embracing something else besides the typical cinematic style experience. Not that Stellar Blade doesn't also have some cinematic qualities. If that sounds like a good time to you, check it out. But that's going to do it for this video, so we'll see you next time.